A cross-linguistic study of open palm hand gestures and their prosodic correlates. Do open hand palm gestures vary across languages? This exploratory study of storytelling in Metropolitan French, American English, and Kabyle Berber uses single and multiple correspondence analysis to show that storytellers of the three languages perform different recurrent open palm gesture orientations, and that the speech prosody accompanying those gestures is different depending on the language of the storytellers. Some gestures are performed very frequently, have a pragmatic function, and show similarities in form and trajectory. They are conventionalized to a certain degree, culturally shared, and identified clearly within the stream of manual movements. They also show a stable form-meaning relation and can be distinguished from singular gestures. The open hand gestures we studied are realized with 5 orientations: palm away, palm down, palm on side, palm towards self, and palm up. The palm up open hand gesture is a recurrent gesture form pointing to some object as if it were being presented to the interlocutor as something that should be looked at or inspected. It's also used by speakers to add nuance to their speech through expression of some epistemic stance, uncertainty in most contexts.
Et chacun était venu avec un cadeau, une manière de lui dire « bienvenue dans la vie ».
The palm on side gesture has a vertical frame configuration, metaphorically locating a defined discourse object in the physical space before the speaker, thus making it possible for the speaker to establish contrasts between different referents in speech. When performed with one hand, the same gesture has a dividing function between discourse items. It may also have a pointing function when oriented towards an interlocutor, and in this context, it has an interactive function. It includes the interlocutor as sharing a viewpoint without having to mention this explicitly in speech.
My sister, she has been cursed by the cold-eyed witch, and she has stuck upon this big black rock.
The palm away gesture expresses negation by simulating interruption or repulsion, avoidance or retreat, but also a possible refusal to take responsibility for what is said or heard. The gesture may also highlight topic changes or the insertion of additional information in speech. The gestures of the palm-down family share the semantic theme of stopping or interrupting a line of action that is in progress. What is meant by line of action is any project that someone might be engaged in, whether this involves physical action, communicative action, such as saying something, or mental activity, such as pursuing a train of thought or assuming a certain mental attitude towards something.
Il n'y a plus rien pour toi ici.
To our knowledge, the palm towards self gesture has not been studied in the literature, but it can be considered as a deictic gesture where the speaker directly refers to himself or herself.
On n'a pas encore inventé des vêtements qui grandissent avec nous.
The study is based on 6 videos featuring the telling of different traditional tales by 6 women. 2 French women, 2 American women, and 2 Kabyle women. The transcription was done manually in Praat for each video. The recording was transcribed verbatim using the intonation units of the British tradition, and distinction was made between minor and major intonation phrases. Open palm gestures were coded in Elan with the sound turned off, and gesture annotation was based on form only, without any distinction of gesture function in speech or movement type. Gesture apices, points of maximal extension, were coded as well. They served as reference alignment points for all the annotations. The files were prosodically annotated along the following lines. Turn constructional units, that is, groups of minor IUs that form a single piece of information, were delimited. Turn constructional units were divided into 3 temporally equal segments, and we coded gesture apices as occurring either at the beginning, in the middle, or at the end of TCUs. IU type. We noted whether the IUs preceding, co-occurring with, or following gesture apices were minor or major ones in 3 separate tracks. Pauses. Pause type before the co-occurring IU or after it was coded as silence, breathing, or complex. The intonation contour of the IU containing the gesture apex, as well as the contours of the preceding and following ones, were indicated. We indicated whether there was a pitch reset at the beginning of the IU that co-occurred with the gesture apex or at the beginning of the following IU, and we noted the presence or absence of a focal accent, a marked prosodic prominence, which can have a contrastive or emphatic value, mostly expressed by extra lengthening of a syllable or a syllable onset, and or higher pitch. And we then set up to investigate the 2 main questions of our study. How do types of open palm hand gestures vary across different languages? And how do the gestures align with the prosodic features of the accompanying speech? In order to answer our research questions, we conducted a simple and a multiple correspondence analysis with the R statistical software using the packages FactoMineR and FactoExtra for multivariate analysis. The results show a strong correspondence between Gaëlle and the use of both palm away and palm down gestures, while the American tellers rather use palm on side gestures, and the French use palm up ones. The palm towards self hand orientation is not significantly used by any cultural group. The Gaëlle storyteller's profile is distant both from the French, who stand at the opposite side of the first dimension, and from the Americans, who also stand on the opposite side of the second dimension, although Gaëlle storytellers are closer in their gesture performance to the Americans than to the French. Here are the contributions of the different variables. The most important variables contributing to dimension 1 are position of gesture apex in the TCU and intonation unit type, minor or major, during apices. The most important variables contributing to dimension 2 are intonation unit type, minor or major, before apex, intonation contour before apex, and the existence of a pitch reset in the intonation unit where the apex occurs. Figure 3 presents the storytellers of the 3 languages in 3 different squares of the 2-dimension plot issued by the multiple correspondence analysis. The prosodic features in each square are the ones which correlate the most with each language and gesture palm orientation, with negligible variation between speakers inside each language group, despite variation in the contents of the stories. The French storytellers are represented in the bottom left square of the plot. Their most frequent gesture orientations are the palm towards self and palm up gestures, which are generally performed in the middle of the TCU, with typically no pitch reset after the IU they are aligned with. The co-occurring IU is a minor one, with a flat or rising F0 contour, while the contour of the preceding IU is also flat. The Kabyle storytellers are shown in the upper right square of the plot. Their preferred hand orientation is the palm away gesture, but they also perform quite a few palm down hand gestures, an orientation shared with the Americans. They align the gestures preferentially with the end of the TCU, although this correlation is weak, and with a pitch reset on the following IU. The contour of the major IUs they accompany is either a rise-fall or a simple fall, while the preceding IU has a fall-rise contour. The American storytellers are represented in the upper left square of the plot. Their preferred gesture orientation is the palm on side, although, as stated before, they also perform quite a few palm down gestures. Their gestures are aligned with the beginning of the TCU, and the IUs they accompany are typically preceded by a pause, especially audible breathing, but other pause types are present as well. The contour of these IUs is most often a fall rise, and they are uttered with a pitch reset, while the contour of the preceding major IUs is a rise-fall or a fall. Our exploratory study statistically confirms the correlation between language and preferred hand orientation, and between gesture apex and specific prosodic features, themselves differing depending on the language. In American English, the palm on side gesture is typically performed at the beginning of the TCU in a minor IU preceded by a pause and uttered with a falling or rising tone, and it delimits narrative sequences. In French, the palm up gesture typically occurs in the middle of the TCU, is synchronized with a minor IU uttered with a flat or rising contour, and it presents the information to the listener for inspection. In Kabyle, the palm away and palm down gestures are aligned with the end of TCUs in major IUs uttered with a rise-fall or a fall, followed by a pitch reset. They mark retreat from individual stance taking. The type of open hand palm gesture and the correlation between gesture apex and prosodic event type indeed correlate with language, presenting different profiles for the three languages under study. Does this reflect different cultural uses of recurrent pragmatic gestures? This is what we would like to suggest for further study, proposing differences in storytelling types. The American storytellers seem to be focused on the sequence of events. The French storytellers seem to be focused on the interpersonal presentation of information, while the Kabyle storytellers seem to be focused on their stance taking, showing a kind of distanciation towards their story that may have to do with the fact that traditional folktale in Kabyle oral culture involves less individual positioning, the speakers being skilled vessels through which a tradition is passed on from one generation to the next, rather than individual performers. Thank you, merci, ten mirth, and many thanks to the speakers for their contribution to our study.